In Welcome everyone. Welcome. Happy New Year, everyone. January 1st, 2026. I hope all of you are enjoying your holidays. You're with your loved ones. You spent some time with family and friends. I know it's not always the best time for all of us, but at least I'm hoping that you've had some time to recalibrate, reflect on the year that was, and are ready to enter 2026 for the year that will be. And folks, before we get into today's live, I think my focus on my camera isn't really there just yet, but before I wanted to begin today just saying, first of all, thank you everyone. Some of you have noticed that, longtime subscribers, you've noticed that the views, the likes, the shares, the subscribers have all grown quite dramatically, especially after my last video on Conestoga College. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time and viewing and commenting and sharing and subscribing. It really means so much to me because I've always thought that these are the conversations that we need to be having as Canadians. And I think that so many of us are just really looking online for where these conversations are happening. And one thing I've noticed is many times they're relegated to like the Reddit boards or messaging boards or group chats with friends. And I think there's a real opportunity to get at the root and at the heart of some of these issues, with actual receipts to back them up. And so I really appreciate the culture and the community that we're creating together on my channel. I see it in the comments. They're very thoughtful, articulate comments. Yeah, of course, you're going to get the one or two that, will not like your stuff, and that's okay. But by and large, it's just a very respectful, respectable place to be. And that leads me into today's live stream that I wanted to do with all of you because there's this word that keeps getting thrown around. And I've noticed when I use this word, um, it takes people back and they really stop engaging. And that word is scam. SCAM, scam. When I start saying, or at least pointing to the fact that this whole international student public college thing, it has the makings of being some type of scam, I notice a lot of my friends or family members start like really shutting down. And I wanted to explore that word because I think that there's merit to saying that. But when we say it, we actually might be getting people away from talking about the real issues, if that makes sense. When you start saying things that are a scam, people start thinking that you're kind of like, you have a fringe idea, you have a fringe perspective, you're out there kind of like some conspiracy theorist, when really, there's real issues with the college system that need to be discussed. So while I believe that this has the makings of a scam, um, I want us to kind of rethink that word a little bit because instead, it's a system that's been created that ultimately it just doesn't work in the favor of long-term of Canada in the long term. What kind of country are we building with what we're putting forward here today? And so I want to organize this live with you today in three main sections. First, I want to talk a little bit about what Canada is doing, what the federal policies have been put forward, and then get a little bit into what I'm seeing, colleges take advantage of from that federal policy. And I think that's actually the most important part to start thinking about this because, on other videos of mine, many times governments put forward policy and they don't include any of us, any Canadian. No Canadian is involved in the creation of public policy. And I get it, like some policies are just so complicated and you can't involve Canadians on every single policy every step of the way. I get that. It makes sense. Like not every Canadian needs to be involved in the regulations over, emissions from our farming sector, agricultural sector. Like, I get that. There's complicated topics for a reason, and we trust our governments to do things that are generally in the best interest of Canadians. I don't know how much engagement they had with Canadians on immigration, but when they started going down this path of international students and this massive influx of, hundreds of thousands, millions in 2023 and then in 2024, that's when Canadians were like, what's going on? And that has signaled this massive shift, backlash, if you will, that even Justin Trudeau acknowledged near the end of his term last year. And so it got me thinking again, like governments go out very far on some policy, and then we as Canadians have to kind of reel them in, which is probably not the best way of doing public policy. So I thought to myself, what's the best example I can share with you that exemplifies this exact thing that I'm saying? And so I'm going to share with you one in particular policy that I found really interesting. Okay. This is from 2020, July 2020. Two-step immigration selection. Now, I want us to just remind ourselves of two-step immigration. So before I get into the two-step immigration, just as a high level, before, if you wanted to immigrate to Canada, Canada selected you, right? We have an economic immigration stream. You apply, you show that you have, your education, you have money in the bank, you speak English or French. There's a points-based system, and Canada literally selects you. It's a one-step immigration process. And we've had temporary foreign workers. We've had temporary foreign workers for decades, but they were always temporary. And Canada was not unlike anywhere else in the world. Countries around the world, developed countries, had temporary foreign workers because they filled seasonal labor gaps, shortages in specific industries. Really, it started. I mean, if anyone is a history buff and they want to go down that path, you'll remember that the temporary foreign worker program, the roots of that program were in the agriculture space, where farmers and companies were like, we need people to be out in the fields, working the fields for specified periods of the year. And we recognize that not every Canadian wants to do this. They don't live close to these areas. And so we need to bring in foreign workers because what's going to happen is we're going to pay them in Canadian dollars, and they're going to take that money back, sometimes back to their home country, and they'll basically make a lot more during those seasonal periods than they would in their home country. It's a chance for them to make more money, hopefully benefit themselves and their families back home, but also it's an opportunity for them to even think about immigration in sometime in the future. So temporary was temporary. And what happened over the years is temporary foreign workers started expanding to other sectors, including like healthcare and nursing and home care, excuse me. And suddenly employers saw, wow, like we can access temporary foreign workers for so much more than just agriculture. But what happened again over time is temporary foreign workers started staying longer. And as they stayed longer, they were getting more Canadian labor experience, work experience. And so that started this path again of what the government has called two-step immigration. So unlike the one step where you come to Canada, sorry, you apply to Canada, the government determines right there if Christopher is qualified or not. That's a one-step model. Now there's a two-step model, and this is directly from the federal government. So here it goes again. One half of economic immigrants. This is from the federal government. Selecting economic immigrants from former temporary foreign workers is essentially a two-step migration process. Under this process, skilled migrants first obtain temporary resident status to work or study. Their skills and qualifications are evaluated by Canadian employers when they're looking for jobs and further tested while they're on the job. Secondly, the temporary resident applies for permanent residency and is selected based on the criteria outlined in either the provincial or federal economic immigrant programs. The employment and or study experience in the receiving country as a temporary resident often strengthens qualifications for the pathway to permanent residency as an economic immigrant, viewed as a signal of relevant and in demand labor market skills. So, when I look at this, this is a subtle policy shift. And I know it's very nerdy. Like, I know I'm getting into like the nerdy part of government policy making, which, some people like and some don't. But my point here is the government subtly shifted our entire immigration policy and how you immigrate to Canada from one where it was very stringent before economic immigration. My parents came to Canada as economic immigrants, to one where if you were a temporary worker or international student and you were here long enough, you could then gain Canadian work experience to then apply for permanent residency in Canada. Now, again, this is a major shift because the policymakers are saying, well, we have these labor shortages, and if you have Canadian work experience, you're already a leg up than someone, say, from another country, and we have to go through their application and, compare everything, and, they don't have Canadian experience. It's a whole thing. But by making this subtle shift, it suddenly now allows more to enter Canada as permanent residents, not going through the typical tests that an economic immigrant would go through, right? There is no analysis of the individual the way that there would be for an economic immigrant. So, this subtle shift to a two-step immigration model fundamentally alters people's drive to come to Canada. Because now, if you're sitting in a developing country in a part of the world, you now see a pathway to permanent residency from being a temporary foreign worker or international student. That is a massive, massive shift in immigration because coming to Canada, coming to the United States, coming to any G7 country from the global south is like the one of the highest things you can do. You need to get out of your community. And if you can do that through temporary foreign work, I mean, that's such a massive shift that Canada undertook. And I can't understate that enough, or maybe I'm overstating that. But the reason why I want to start that there is because when we start thinking of, this college system is a scam and there's international students flooding in, I just want us to pause first to look at the policy that our government put forward. I mean, this was written in 2020. I mean, there's policy documents from earlier than that. The Global Skills Strategy from 2011. There are policy documents in the mid 2000s as well that show this underpinning where Canada is now going to rely more on temporary foreign workers, international students, to quote, fill these critical labor gaps. Now, I'm going to just say this here so that because I know some of you may agree with me on this. I really do question these labor gaps that the government and others often talk about. To me, what I see, excuse me, is this system that's been set up that facilitates someone coming to Canada not through the traditional means, and it's not their doing. It's the government of Canada's opening up of these different pathways, right? So when employers say there's a labor shortage, I question that. And the reason I question that is because, again, I want to share something with you. Um, the reason I question that is because of this one fact. And it's a fact. And again, I don't know if people really want, I don't know if people really want to see this. But this is something that I've always struggled with. And let me just see. My computer is not working with me right now. Um, because I think this is so important that we as Canadians really focus in on. Let me just get this up for you. And that is this right here. So youth unemployment. And I just want to share this with you. I mean, look at these rates of annual youth unemployment in Canada, Germany, Ireland. I know this is really small. Let me see if I can zoom in. Um, so, I mean, you can see it for yourself. Ireland's youth unemployment is the dark blue line there, but Canada's has hovered at 15%. And of course, during the pandemic, it spiked. I think it went up all the way past 25%. Um, and I know Stats Can looks at these charts and they say, well, Canada's doing much better than, the United Kingdom or Ireland even, and Germany's doing much better than Canada. But it's not like 15% youth unemployment is out of this world. But for me, it is. It is very much out of this world because if employers are telling us that there are these labor shortages and they can't find workers, so they have to go abroad, then why is the government not looking at our youth unemployment and saying, okay, then you need to share with Canadians policies about how you're selecting Canadians first? Because that was and is a requirement of the temporary foreign worker program. A requirement of the program is that employers have to show that they've tried to hire Canadians and Canadians either are not applying or they're not qualified for their jobs. But then the government introduced the International Mobility Program, which removed that requirement completely and allowed employers to hire foreigners directly without showing that they tried to hire Canadians first. Okay. So again, subtle policy shifts, the two-step immigration process, and then you have the International Mobility Program, which removes the requirement for employers to try to hire Canadians. And then, of course, you have, excuse me, stumbling over my words here. And then, of course, you have high youth unemployment at 15%, and it's generally not been any different over the past 15 years. You can go back, look at the data on Canada's annual youth unemployment numbers. It is wild. There are regions in Canada that have even higher numbers for youth unemployment in, 20%, even higher. In small communities across Canada, it just matters a lot. So that's where I start saying that this whole college system scam, and again, for those that have just joined the stream, thank you so much for joining, and thank you for liking and sharing and subscribing. Please tell your friends and family members about the channel and everything that I'm trying to do here for Canadians. Um, but when we start talking about a college scam, I look at the policy documents that our federal government has put forward that actually showcase where their priorities are. The last thing I want to share with you, if my computer will cooperate this time, which I think it will, I actually think I have this up already. Ah, yes. So this is something I really want to share with you, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Um, I think that this is something that we need to be talking about more. So some of you may know this, but for a time period, there was an unlimited cap on the number of hours international students could work while they were studying. if you can actually believe that. So that to me signals that the government was clearly using international students, again, to fill, quote, these labor gaps or labor shortages, but it was clearly a way for them to showcase that it's they recognize students are not coming here just to study, they're coming here to work. So, this is something, and there was an unlimited cap from 2022 to 2024 until the feds eventually put in a requirement. So, international students in Toronto will be adversely affected by an impending rule that will limit them to work 24 hours a week off campus when school is in session. Immigration Minister Mark Miller said last spring the new rules will take effect in September. Da, da, da. I just want to Miller said something really. Students who want to come here have to realize they can only work 24 hours in order to offset some of their costs or bring material resources themselves when they come here. And then, of course, the students say, of course, this is going to be hard with groceries and eating out. It's going to be super stressful. But Mark Miller said something else later on. Um, it said, in developing this change, we look at the needs of yeah, oh, I think this is the yeah, this is so wild, like, it's wild that from 2022 to 2024, students could work unlimited hours, and this is so important, uh, so Mark Miller had said this. Oh, this is it, sorry, I'm so sorry for bouncing around here. He said, "What I really didn't want to do is impact students in a current year that have made their financial calculations about how they will sustain themselves, da da da." Um, Miller said internal work by the department shows that more than 80% of international students are currently working more than 20 hours a week. Now, it's Mark Miller says it's not credible that someone can work 40 hours and do a proper program. So what does a reasonable number of hours look like for someone who's studying, knowing that they're paying 3 or 4 times, sometimes 5 times the price of a domestic student? I think that's above 20 hours. Like, the minister himself knows that this whole thing is wild. Like, what he's doing, what the whole system is wild. You're paying 5 times the tuition rate, and you're also going to let students work unlimited hours off campus. That tells me this isn't about coming here to study. This is a labor market move that you're making. And so I wanted to share with you some of the initial thinking I have on this idea that this college system we have here, that it's a scam or anything like that. Um, I want us to refrain from using the word scam. Um, Instead, I want us to look at the policies that the federal government has put forward that to me indicate that this is much more than what we all think. There's a system that the federal government has set up, particularly for international students to come here and to work, and I don't think Canadians are being prioritized. I'm gonna have a lot more to say about this in my next video. So if you haven't already, folks, like, share, comment, subscribe. I'm gonna do a lot more of these. I'll do more shorts, I'll do more videos, I'll do more lives. If you want me to do a live stream where a Q&A is involved, let me know. I'll put up a Q&A poll. We'll get some questions going. I'll answer them on the fly based on all the research that I'm seeing. But again, folks, thanks for you know, tuning in, help watching me meander through this research. But all this to say, this is a system that's being set up. It's directly because of what the federal government wants to see from international students. And again, I want us to refrain from the word scam. I want us to then look at the system because it's a system that's being set up. I've said that too many times. Okay. I hope you have a wonderful new year. Thank you so much for liking and sharing and subscribing. Tell your friends, tell your family. Again, folks, this is the only place where these conversations are happening. Thanks again. And I'll catch you in the next video that's going to drop very soon. Take care. Bye for now.